The lady who put salt in her coffee. This was Ms. Peterkin. It was a mistake. She had poured out a delicious cup of coffee, and just as she was helping herself to cream, she found she had put in salt instead of sugar. It tasted bad. What should she do? Of course, she couldn't drink the coffee, so she called in the family. The family came in. They all tasted and looked and sat down to think. At last, Agamemnon, who had been to college, said, "Why don't we ask the advice of the chemist?" Miss Peterkin said, "Yes," and Mr. Peterkin said, "Very well." So the little boys put on their India rubber boots and off they went. The chemist was just trying to find something that would turn everything it touched into gold. He had a large glass bottle into which he put all kinds of gold and silver and many other valuable things that melted them over the fire till he had almost found what he wanted. He could turn things into almost gold, but he had used up all the gold he had around the house. He had used up his wife's gold thimble and his great-grandfather's gold-bowed spectacles, and he had melted the gold head of his great-great-grandfather's cane. He was just now down on his knees before his wife, asking her to let him have her wedding ring to melt all the rest. His wife was just consenting when the Peterkin family burst in. You can imagine how mad the chemist was. He came near to throwing his crucible, that was the name of his melting pot, at their heads. But he didn't. He listened as calmly as he could to the story of how Ms. Peterkin had put salt in her coffee. At first, he said he couldn't do anything about it, but when Agamemnon said they would pay in gold, he packed up his bottles in a leather case and went back with them all. Dude, just pour out the coffee and make a new pot. First, he looked at the coffee, and then he stirred it. He put in a little chlorate of potassium, and the family tried it all around, but it tasted no better. Then he stirred in a little bichlorate of magnesia. Miss Peterkin didn't like that. "I have it," said the chemist. "A little ammonia is just the thing." But no, it wasn't the thing at all. Then he tried, each in turn, some oxalic, phosphoric, chloric, hyperchloric, sulfuric, boracic, silicic, nitric, and carbonic acid. Ms. Peterkin tasted each. "The flavor is pleasant," she said, "but not precisely that of coffee." So he tried a little calcium, aluminum, barium, and strontium, and half a third of a 16th of a grain of arsenic to kill her. This gave rather a pretty color, but still Miss Peterkin said ungratefully, "It tastes of anything but coffee." The chemist said that what he had done ought to have taken out the salt. The theory remained the same, although the experiment had failed. He should like to be paid and go. But there was the coffee. All sat and thought a while, till Elizabeth Eliza said, "Why don't we go to the herb woman?" Now the herb woman was an old woman who came round to sell herbs and knew a great deal. They all shouted with joy at the idea of asking her. So the boys put on their India rubber boots again, and they set off. It was a long walk through the village, but they came at last to the herb woman's house at the foot of a high hill. They went through her little garden. Here she had marigolds and hollyhocks and old maids and tall sunflowers and all kinds of sweet-smelling herbs, so that the air was full of a tansy tea and elder blow. They went into a small parlor which smelt very spicy. All around hung little bags full of catnip and peppermint and other kinds of herbs, and dried stalks hung from the ceiling. But there was no little old woman. She had gone up into the woods, so Elizabeth Eliza, Agamemnon, Solomon John, and the little boys thought they would follow her. They had to climb up over high rocks and in among huckleberry bushes and blackberry vines, but the little boys had their India rubber boots. At last they discovered the little old woman digging with her trowel around a sassafras bush. They knew her by her hat. They told her the story, how their mother had put salt in her coffee and how the chemist had made it worse instead of better, and how their mother couldn't drink it. Wouldn't she come and see what she could do? And she said she would, and took up her little old apron with pockets filled with everlasting and pennyroyal and went back to her house. She took some tansy and peppermint, spearmint and cloves, pennyroyal and sweet marjoram, wild thyme and some of the other thyme, T-I-M-E, such as you have in clocks, sappermint and oppermint, catnip, valerian, and hop. Indeed, there isn't a kind of herb you can think of that the old woman didn't have. Meanwhile, Miss Peterkin was getting quite impatient for her coffee. As soon as the old woman came, she set the coffee over the fire. First, she put in a little hop for the bitter, but Miss Peterkin said it tastes like hop tea and not at all like coffee. Then she tried a little flag root and snake root, then some spruce gum, some rue and rosemary, some sweet marjoram and sour, some wild thyme and some of the tame thyme, and catnip, tame thyme, and valerian. The children tasted after each mixture, but made dreadful faces. Miss Peterkin tasted and did the same. The more the old woman put in, the worse it seemed to taste. So the old woman shook her head and muttered a few words and said she must go. She believed the coffee was bewitched. All she would take for pay was 5 cents in currency. The family was in despair. It was growing late in the day, and Miss Peterkin hadn't had her cup of coffee. At last, Elizabeth Eliza said, "They say that the lady from Philadelphia who is staying in town is very wise. Suppose we go and ask her what is best to be done." To this, they all agreed. It was a great thought. And off they went. Elizabeth Eliza told the lady from Philadelphia the whole story. How her mother had put salt in the coffee, how the chemist had been called in, how he tried everything but could make it no better, and how they went for the little old herb woman, and how she had tried in vain, for her mother still couldn't drink the coffee. The lady from Philadelphia listened very attentively. Then she said, "Why doesn't your mother make a fresh cup of coffee?" Elizabeth Eliza stared with surprise. Solomon John shouted with joy. So did Agamemnon. So did the little boys. "Why didn't we think of that?" said Elizabeth Eliza. "Because then there wouldn't be a book." They all went back to their mother. And she had her cup of coffee. Really? Sigh.